Hi, my name is Courtney. I'm going to be auditioning for the role of General Grievous today.
Hi, Courtney.
I'm going to do his big monologue, his big scene in which we really get to know General Grievous and his character.
I'm really excited to see this, yes.
Scene.
That was brilliant. You are going to Hollywood.
But Clone Wars, despite not being canon because the old Walt Disney Company ripped that beneath our feet, even though there's really no real reason for it, it remains a very beloved place in Star Wars history, as well as a forgotten one often. You know, nowadays, now that we have our new Clone Wars or our new old Clone Wars, and we tend to forget what actually came before it. In fact, Clone Wars was meant to actually be the pilot for the later series that we were getting while they were developing this 3D technology. And it does stand as its own thing. It's very different from anything we've seen in Star Wars. It's actually the first animated series that we've gotten since Ewoks in 1985. Clone Wars 2003 was actually handled by Genndy Tartakovsky. And he was, if you know the show Samurai Jack, he was the creator of Samurai Jack as well as Dexter's Laboratory, the former of which he implemented a lot of style choices with Star Wars. George actually sought out Tartakovsky and said, hey, you know, this is something I want to do. I've wanted to explore the Clone Wars time for a long time.
You fought in the Clone Wars?
And it's sort of been this coveted mysterious part before 2003 because it was totally banned from being explored in Legends. George was like, you're not allowed to touch it. I'm going to do something with it. And many people say that with as much as the newer Clone Wars series is coveted and appreciated, a lot of people wish there were some elements from the old show that translated over into the new one. And I do think that comparing the two of them is a little bit unfair. They're vastly different shows despite sharing the same namesake. But my question is, does this micro series hold up? We shall be the judge of that. There are a lot of things in this show that look just so unbelievable because of the fact that it's in two-dimensional. There's so much expression. There's so much twisted up expression on their faces and beautiful color across the galaxy and you know, just some wild things that they do that you're like, wow, they can move so fast in this show. And even tonally, everything is so much faster. I think that is like the general consensus of how this show works. You see, the thing with how Clone Wars 2003 was set up was it was basically meant to be a mini-series and originally was structured to sort of act as commercials in between Cartoon Network's Big Friday block that aired on Fridays, but it sort of ended up being a lot more than that. You know, instead of just being like 30 seconds to a minute, it ended up being 3 to 4 minutes. I know, they went all in on it. And they would air weekly, and there's 3 seasons, so the first 2 seasons, Volume 1 and Volume 2, they have 10 3 to 4 minute episodes each, and then Season 3 got a little bit different. There were 5 segments, and they were all like 13 to 15 minutes each. So there was definitely a big shakeup between the second season and the third season in terms of how the show flowed, and I'll get into whether that was for the better or for the worse later on when I talk about the actual seasons of the show. There are 2 ways to watch Clone Wars 2003 though. There is the original way and how it was intended to be watched, and that was in these fast blip little segments where you're kind of going all across the galaxy and everything, and it's not necessarily overwhelming because you're only watching 1 or 2 or something like that. But you're watching them individually and as they are on their own, and they're brief little mini episodes, kind of like how Disney did The Forces of Destiny, except with a lot less dialogue. Or you could watch it all at once. Now, this is extremely accessible because it's actually all available on YouTube. I think that if you glean this show from the perspective of watching it on an individual basis and watching these little clips, I think that you'll gain more appreciation for what they're trying to do and how much they accomplish with what little time they had. It is amazing what they do with 3 to 4 minutes here. I think this is the very definition of utilizing your time. It's just really fun to watch. It's so fast. It's the action sequences. It's kind of like the best parts of the prequels, which was the action and the choreography, but that's it. And there are signs of characters and characterizations in that. They have their brief quiet moments. I have very like visual memories of remembering this show, and there are certain aspects of this show that I actually definitely carry with me still. My image of Kit Fisto is not at all formed from the 2008 series, or especially not his live action appearances, but from this, because this is Kit Fisto at his finest. We see him in his zone, in his realm. I don't think that anything is going to be as cool as seeing him develop and fight underwater and defend the Mon Calamari, which is something that they translate into the later series, but it's something that is just so cool, and I don't think that they've been able to make him look as cool and be as epic as they did. You know, he dies in like 3 seconds when he fights Palpatine, and that's so disappointing. And I remember that being so disappointing to me because when I watched the show, I was like, wow, he's awesome. He's OP. And then after that, you know, he really wasn't anymore. Clone Wars is so driven by the music, which feels right for Star Wars, you know, because John Williams' score has always been an important part of setting the mood in the movies. But here, it really encapsulates the scene. There's all these battle scenes, and you feel it through the music. You feel the tension, and you feel how deep it is through the music, you know. There isn't a lot said. There's very, very little dialogue here. And the voice acting is pretty good. There's a few people that stay on to go forward. You know, James Arnold Taylor, he does Obi-Wan Kenobi here, and he does it later in 2008. Tom Kane does Yoda. He does Yoda later, amongst other characters. Like I said, everything is super fast here, and it's very action-driven. So it's very fun to watch. It's like the best parts of action. It feels like a compilation of action sequences that you'd like look up on YouTube, like top 10 lightsaber battles, and it's super fun to watch. And there is depth to them, and there is a ton of foreshadowing. And I think the way Anakin is handled here is very, very interesting. You know, he's very much who we saw in Attack of the Clones. And whether or not that's something you like, it's very in tune to what George Lucas had suggested and what he had led off with. Here, it's kind of like he sounds like Hayden Christensen when he talks, not so much when he like yells and stuff. There is a lot of character development in terms of hinting at him being Darth Vader. I don't think I see him as much of like the embodiment of a great Jedi. You know, we're just told basically in this show that he's promoted to Jedi because it just needs to be done. And that's something that's very curious, because I think that explains a lot about Anakin's relationship to Obi-Wan, and I think it explains a lot about his relationship to the Council. You know, he kind of always goes around feeling like he didn't earn it, even though he says he's a Jedi, and he says that he is, and he's very confident in his abilities. But even Obi-Wan says in this show, like, your abilities were never, ever at question. It's your maturity, and he never really matures in this show. But, like, while it's lacking in that part, I understand that they couldn't spend too much time in it. The parts that like insinuate his being Darth Vader and that darkness that's growing inside him is so awesome. One of the greatest scenes in animation, maybe in animation in general, honestly, is when he's fighting Ventress, which this is Ventress's introduction too. There's just this, it's the scenery, and it's really colorful, and it goes to show that it doesn't need to have like this dark, dingy lighting to be insinuated at the dark tones, you know, the lightsabers that are clashing across, and you can see the reflection on their faces, and Anakin's is like blue, and then it's like the red just like comes over him, and he uses Ventress's lightsaber, and when he takes that, this rage grows inside him, and there's not really any founded reason for him to hate her the way that he does. Anakin just gives in to his rage, and he uses her red lightsaber, and that was such a whoa moment. And when he's slashing and he's fighting, and you just see the flashes of all the Jedi, it's very visceral, and it's very, very poignant. So it just goes to show that with action sequences, you can have deep character moments, which I think is how this show does it. And I really appreciate that too. The clone troopers really are not emphasized in this, which I think is one of the kind of downsides of it, in terms of like there's no real connection there. And maybe I never would have thought that after, it's probably unfair because I feel that way now. I don't know if I felt that way as a kid, because now that we've seen that the clones can have feelings in the later show, it feels a little bit like a missed opportunity here. You know, Anakin calls everyone trooper. He doesn't ever establish a connection with them. But I liked all like the little journeys that they sprinkled in there. I liked how it bounced from thing to thing to thing in the first 2 seasons. I felt like it made the war seem like it stretched beyond just our main characters. Like, yes, it was an awesome fight scene to see Obi-Wan fight that rubber band monster thing that really didn't get much clarity on what that was ever, but it was cool to watch. It was neat seeing Luminara and Barriss on Ilum. It was neat to see Mace Windu totally kick ass, although I will say all the Jedi in this are really, really OP. Like, we're complaining in like the sequel trilogy about Rey, and I know these people have had a lot more training than her, but like they just are just shoving huge armies of droids aside. I'm just like, well, why was Order 66 a problem for you guys? Because you guys can clearly take care of yourself. General Grievous is at the height of his personality in this. He is so scary. He's like a phantom in the night. There's just this scene where he just goes ham on all these Jedi and he's just collecting his lightsabers. And the reason, honestly, is that he's not coughing. He's not a coughing fit, and he's not this huge narcissist. He's like this terrifying phantom man. And just that whole fight, like, he's absolutely maddening, and he doesn't have the 4 arms at first. You can definitely tell that with General Grievous, a lot of it was still in development. Like, this was all before Revenge of the Sith, you know? And they hadn't developed his, like, coughing and his obsession with Count Dooku and his huge narcissistic personality, and how he just, like, has 4 arms. Like, all these things were added in later, and, you know, there's even an explanation quickly why he coughs. Like, Mace Windu just goes, "Cluck," and that's why he coughs a lot. So Ventress, though, her character model was used, as I said. She doesn't have pupils, though, and that's so scary. I remember being a kid and being so afraid of that. Although, having her and seeing her as a villain it piqued my interest, and it actually inspired me to read comic books, as well as Underwater Kit Fisto. That was one of the coolest things ever. We get to see all this stuff leading up to Revenge of the Sith, and I think it's really neat how they sort of pepper in little details. C-3PO, there's this really cursed moment.
Well, let's see it.
Here, now, in this neighborhood. Very well, if you wish.
Impressive.
And it made me realize he didn't have gold plating in Attack of the Clones. Honestly, like, this whole time, I watched Attack of the Clones so little that I was like, oh no, I thought he did. And then I'm looking back and I'm like, that is not gold. You're absolutely right. Anakin gets the scar on his eye. We get to see, you know, him becoming a Jedi Knight, which I thought was really cool. Anakin and Padme's relationship is still really uncomfortable to sit through.
Annie.
But this show is so much a continuation from the movie. Like, it's more fun to watch because it's like the Battle of Geonosis parts of the movie. It's still in that, though, whereas the Clone Wars 2008 tries to be like, we're moving it towards Revenge of the Sith. This one's kind of like, and we're coming off Attack of the Clones, and we're moving it into Revenge of the Sith, which, as I mentioned earlier, the 15-minute segments, believe it or not, I liked the shorter segments better. I liked being blipped all across the galaxy. I liked seeing different things happening at the speed of light, honestly. I thought they utilized their time better, whereas in the last season it feels a lot more traditional in terms of, like, they're trying really hard to, you know, blend everything together. They're really insinuating this, you know, kidnapping on Coruscant with Palpatine and everything, and meanwhile, you know, Anakin and Obi-Wan are off doing their thing, and they're helping this tribe of people. It seems a little racially insensitive at first, but I promise it gets heartwarming. And actually the scene with, like, all the ink and stuff, like, it was just to make an Anakin action figure. It was so obvious when it was happening back then and now, and I actually have that action figure, so, you know, that's how I know. It was good to see how much of a badass Shakti was in the last season. That was definitely a positive. I feel like she's a character who had a lot of hope and a lot of promise based on deleted scenes from the prequel trilogy. I really am glad that we got to see her face off against Grievous. She does not win. It's very impactful in the end, but it's especially impactful knowing that all of this is a big ruse set up by Palpatine. And I hope to see it in 3D to some perspective too, as well as Order 66. So I do think this show holds up. I really do. I don't think it's useful in comparing it to the Clone Wars too much, or saying which one I think I still like the Clone Wars 2008 more. I like what we get more more with that. I personally am one of those people that really appreciates a more in-depth storytelling in terms of character development and everything. Everything on screen here sort of has to be shown and felt through music, and it's really different, and it's very like palate cleansing in a sense. It's fun to watch. It really is. It's just a lot. I do think this show holds up. I think that there are a lot of things about it that I wish were a little bit different, but for what it was and the time it came, I think the animation is absolutely stunning. I think the music and the choreography and the way that everything is just visually handled is just remarkable. I would absolutely recommend this to anyone who likes Star Wars, anyone who is interested in that Clone Wars era that isn't really told in the later series that we get, and to get a different perspective of what we were looking for at that time. This was definitely a big video game era, you know, like Battlefront, the Battlefront games, Knights of the Old Republic games, all of they were like pouring out at this time. This very much feels like a video game in a sense. There's a lot of comics, there's a lot of lore tied to this series because people were chomping at the bits to get access to the Clone Wars. And I think that there's a reason why this is coveted amongst hardcore fans. This was their Clone Wars in a lot of ways. And a lot of characters like Grievous or Kit Fisto or even Mace Windu were handled with a lot of a different perspective here. And they just seem so much more, you know, formidable than they were in Revenge of the Sith revealed to be. Have you seen the Clone Wars 2003? If not, you should. May the Force be with you guys. Have a great day. I think you should just dive yourself into it. This plushie actually right here is from the Clone Wars 2003 campaign. I'm just looking at that. I'm like, whoa. Everything just sort of explodes after lightsabers thrust on them. Who else does